igualdad, pero esta vez me separaron. Dijeron mucho, pero no se olvidaron de callarse. Cuánto odio por mi piel sembraron. Dijeron historia y la tergiversaron. Dijeron guerra, muerte, odio y nos culparon. Enfermedades, epidemias nos contagiaron. Exterminación de mi fauna complace a tus mercados. Dijeron riqueza y todo se lo robaron. Oro, platino, diamante, a la fuerza se lo llevaron. Y la actualidad es tan triste que todo aquello que dijeron es lo mismo que hoy se dice más. ¿Quién dice, quién explota, quién se beneficia? El asesino, el mismo que da las noticias. Hay una cuenta fácil que siempre me da las grandes riquezas, de dónde vienen y hasta dónde van.
Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao, independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao. Nati Dre es afroresistencia, cultura ancestral, afrodescendencia, solidaridad. Esa es la esencia, la diáspora africana eleva la conciencia, conciencia negra, universal, progresista y transcultural. Negros y mestizos revolucionando, pueblos caribeños y africanos en un solo bando. No más explotación, colonialismo interno, no más confusión, supremacía blanca en el Babilón. Soy rojo, negro y verde, afroliberación. Mientras más negro, más represión. Somos creadores, recupera tu visión. Mi visión es educar con amor, contra el silencio, vivo sin temor. Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao, independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao.
Grand Rising, everyone. What's up, what's up, what's up?
Grand Rising, rise up, y'all.
Peace,
Rise
peace, everybody.
So
Peace and
good to
black
see
power.
y'all. So good to see y'all.
Yes, it's good to see everybody. It's good to see everybody on here, back here with us, on this screen with us, and as well as everybody who's joining us in the chat. Those people who will be joining us as you know the hour goes on.
Absolutely. Great to be back. Peace and black power to all the Rise Up International Morning Show fans and comrades and family. Peace to my amazing co-hosts here, Kiana and Natasha. It's great to be back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Uhuru to everyone. Uhuru to the uprisers. Y'all
Absolutely.
know the uprisers make it happen.
That's the crew. So what's been going on, y'all?
Oh man,
Everything's been going on.
right?
Everything's been going on.
Just maintaining and doing my best to stay in a mode of constant elevation, constant learning. Being in community with my people, and just adding on wherever I can to continue to bring this fight to imperialism and white hegemony and everything we got going on. I mean, as soon as you turn on the news, it's something new, right? And you can feel it in the air. And so just continue to strive to play my part in it all.
Yeah, definitely. Been doing a lot of work in community with community self-defense, emergency preparedness, street medic trainings have been going on.
Indeed.
Because we see that there's just, I don't know that it's not that our minds can't fathom what's going on and the things that happen, but it's the shock of the way things are happening and how things have been going. There's really a focus right now on making sure that community is prepared for whatever comes our way, because we already see how things are escalating. And for those of us who have been out here, we've been talking about this for a while. Like, this is the time that we were warning about for years now. This is the time that we have been preparing for. And now for a lot of people, it really, really is shaking them up in a different way. And for us, it's just like, all right, yes, it's shocking, but let's take a breath and let's go with our plan, because we
Mm.
do have a plan, and it's time for us to work that plan now more than ever before, because it is certainly needed.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I completely agree that I mean, I think even since the short time, I think it's been like maybe 2 months or maybe 2.5 months um since being on here, but like you said, Kiana, so much has been happening. Like the rate at which things are developing and things are breaking out, things being up and down. Because clearly, Donald Trump doesn't know what he's doing.
Right.
So, like, one minute he's doing this, the next minute he's not, the next minute he's turning around. Like, it's very chaotic, very,
Mhm.
very chaotic. And for me, I felt like I think I got to a point of burnout.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, because I think I was just holding so many things. Um,
Hmm.
and I had to make some choices to rebalance things out. And so here I am back again,
And we
after
are
a
we are happy and glad that you are back.
Yes.
There's one thing I just kind of wanted to say that I've been seeing a lot, I guess, over the past 2 days, is a lot of commentary from people saying what's going on in LA is not our fight, and people need to stay home. And I just think that people got to understand, anytime we are dealing with issues of labor exploitation, capitalism, imperialism, the police state, it's always our fight. It's always connected to what goes on in our communities. And I think it's wrong to discourage people who are already active, uh, who have plans on going out there and being active. I think it's wrong to discourage them not to do so. I think if you don't think that's the cause that you want to go out and support, then you don't stop and prohibit anybody else from doing that. Just stay out the way. Don't say anything. Let people do what they do. But it's too much armchair commentary, because most of these people that you see you see that are making these types of comments aren't even in LA, right? And if the people who are out there, because I saw some footage yesterday of some boots on the ground stuff. It was obviously Mexican people, some African American brothers and sisters, more likely, some quote unquote African immigrants that were there, because ICE affects us all. We all have friends from these nations. We all have uh, we have also the repurposing of the technology that they'll be using, you know, at the border and against migrants will be used and is planned on being used on us in our communities. When we had the counterinsurgency platform that me and Kiana and Dr. Gilmore and Joy and Dr. Joy James and Kalanji were on, one thing that Dr. Gilmore brought out was this plan on facial recognition technology being used in Atlanta for predictive policing, right? And so this is the same type of technology that's used on the border with migrants, the same type of technology that's used on Palestinians. So yeah, it's always interconnected. It's the same enemy. It's the same entity that is doing this to us all. So if you're not going to get involved, I just think it's proper to stay out the way and not discourage anybody else from doing so.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some scrutiny of the "that's not our fight" narrative.
Mhm. And
It's all our fight.
I don't want to say that I don't recognize that there might be any tensions between different groups, right? I
Mhm.
get that.
Mhm.
Those tensions in a lot of ways are exacerbated by our status as colonized people. It's the same way we might look at what the colonizer has done in the global south, in places in Africa and South
Mhm.
America, where they'll take control forcefully, by violence, by force, show favor to one group over the other, create internal conflict, sit back, and they're able to maintain power while we continue to fight each other, while the real enemy is colonialism and imperialism and all the things that they are doing to us while we are, sitting there fighting each other. And I kind of feel like there's a parallel with marginalized communities in America. There's no way the powers that be want us to have any type of solidarity with each other. But I just wanted to say that I didn't mean to cut you off because I didn't want people to think that I'm somehow living in a fantasy world where I don't recognize that there are some tensions within marginalized communities in America. I'm not saying that there aren't. I'm just saying that if you're not getting active, then don't discourage others from doing so.
Absolutely. And I think that when we talk about the fight, right, and the whole that's not our fight narrative, I think that people have to understand that it is all our fight. And I think the conflict is really how do we fight?
Mm,
You fight your way, I'm going to fight my way.
mhm.
You some people do believe that going out there this weekend to the No Kings protest is gonna do something. The others of us are like, well, yeah, go out there with thousands of people at one time in one place and get kettled by cops. You
Right.
do that, but
Right.
maybe it makes more sense for us to take a page from other uprisings in history where there were just smaller protests in many more places.
Mhm.
Because one thing that we see is that the slave catchers are not prepared for guerrilla warfare.
Right.
They are used to catching you all in one place at one time.
Mhm.
Things that are happening in LA and other places can happen the way they're happening because everybody's right there in one place together. But I guarantee you that somebody 50 miles away can do something and won't even get caught
Right.
because they're
Absolutely.
not prepared for that.
Mhm.
We have to be more strategic about the ways that we engage and the level of engagement. How long we want to do a thing, how many times we want to do a thing, what
Mhm.
are we seeking from these things? You know, it's all our
Absolutely.
fight because it all affects us, even the distraction of the breakup between Elon and Trump. It does affect us. Yes, it's a distraction. I'm not gonna not laugh at the fact
Yeah.
that Trump done had his Twitter account deactivated or
Oh, he got
suspended or whatever.
he got deactivated.
Hell yeah, I'm gonna laugh at it because it's flipping hilarious. But I'm not gonna let that be the thing that
Mhm.
has me on cloud nine because it's like, oh, Doge is about to crumble to the ground
Mhm.
because Elon and Trump are having a lovers quarrel. Eh,
Right.
that's that is for us, for those who are that easily distracted and taken off focus. That's for those people to get caught up in and abandon the real work of revolution. But that's not for us to get caught up in.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's comedy gold. But am I going to let that take me away from what we've been focusing on and the things that we've been trying to build in community to make sure that as these types of things happen that we can still maintain? Nah, I'm not
Yeah.
going to let it distract me. It's definitely my fight,
Mhm.
but how do I engage in the fight?
Yeah. I,
Yeah, I think that's the key part about it. And I think um people understanding what it means to be in solidarity, and how to be in solidarity, right?
mm,
Because like you were saying, Kiana, like it looks different. And to Rakim's point about um acknowledging that there are those tensions, and so how do you recognize the tensions and navigate that? And I think also too, one of the things that this moment is highlighting in terms of the conversation around is it our fight or is it not, I think it highlights the fact that a lot of people are not engaged in organizations. So a lot, being
yes.
involved in an organization that helps you to determine how do you think
Mhm.
about what it means to be in solidarity, because we can have people who are individuals on their own saying like, okay, yes, we're in solidarity, with this movement, with this protest, and for these particular reasons. And so therefore I'm going to go out there and do the protesting. I'm gonna go to wherever the thing is happening. I'm gonna go over to California and I'm gonna do it there. And maybe if I'm not over in California, maybe I'll tell some other people that are in California that I know, yeah, you should go out to that
Mhm.
protest. As versus on the other side, you might have, if you are part of an organization and not just an individual, then your organization would decide how
Right.
then they would move in terms of showing solidarity, right?
Right.
You would have some kind of real organizational idea. And I think also as well, an analysis or a position to already about navigating tensions around being inside. How do you be in solidarity while making sure you acknowledge the tensions? Because I think the same thing we've been talking about in terms of the Palestinian genocide that's been happening. How do Black people show up in protest, and how do you also at the same time acknowledge the tensions that, like, okay, we're always showing up for everybody, but people haven't always showed up for us. Or at one point they were showing up for us, but then when they were able to get that little
Hmm.
access, then they
Hmm.
decided, well, we're not going to show up anymore, y'all on your own. And so
Right.
those tensions still there. And I think we're in a way better position to navigate those things when we're part of organizations and not in just individuals ourselves who are then just going, having these conversations back and forth online. You would already be having those conversations with your or people in your organization. You would have worked through, or have a
Hmm.
position on some of these ideas
Yes.
that we're talking about, to be able to help us move in a way that makes sense. And this is the last thing I'll say. I can't remember if it was James Baldwin or if it was someone else that I was seeing talking about, how we can um, work in solidarity with other groups of people, but also, oh no, it wasn't James Baldwin. It was actually Kwame Ture. And maybe I'll have to find that video and bring it back up. Um, for us, we could do it as one of our Black Power breaks another day, because I think this is a continuous theme that we're going to continue to see until we really start to join organizations and start to be in places where we're constantly already discussing these things, and it doesn't just happen when issues come up. But he was just basically saying, like, we need to be in coalition with other people, but we also need to be making sure that we're unified. And so we're so disunified, and so we're
Mm.
so unorganized as a people that it's hard for you to really show up in solidarity when you're already so disorganized, and you need to, you know,
Yeah.
get organized so you can show up in solidarity in the way that reflects all the different nuances of what that means.
Yeah, a
Absolutely.
lot of people have post-organizational or post-traumatic organizational syndrome out here, because some of these organizations ain't about shit. Some of these organizations out here pimping people and committing some egregious harms in community,
Mhm.
and people have experienced it in a very real way.
Hmm.
And there's an element of trepidation in dealing with organizations, right? What I see though is that a lot of people have been getting together to form organizing collectives where they unite around some commonality. They develop some principles of unity within which to operate, and they set the goals of organizing in community and work toward them. What I do see in many of these organizing collectives is that the longer they are working together, they do begin to get tighter. They do move more toward a cadre formation, so that they are becoming organizations to be organized, but not joining some of the more traditional organizations that we see. Because a lot of times, the organizations that are started as so-called Black revolutionary organizations will just be co-opted as they move into the 501c3 industrial complex. And then the next thing you know, they ain't nothing but another rinky dink hashtag out here with some celebrity so called organizers who have created a cult of personality, and they don't have a lot of credibility in
Mm.
places. These are people who do very performative things. And for people who were once a part of the organizations before they became the 501c3, they see a disconnect in how the organization started and where it is now, and the work that's not being done. Because after a while, work ain't being done. I mean, look at M4BL.
Mm,
What is that?
mm.
What is it? Like, this is something that has happened over the course of years. That movement for Black Lives was doing grassroots stuff, but now it's a 501c3 and everything's electoralized. Not that electoral politics doesn't have its place for some people, for some things, but everything just can't be that. And understand, like, if you decide that you want your organization to be um politically focused on electoral politics, then say that, though. Don't
Yeah.
come out here cosplaying as revolutionary and all you're going to tell me to do is vote, 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 because
Mm,
my vote is not going to save me.
mhm, mhm.
But coming together in community is going to save me. So just be real about what you're doing. I think a lot of people just want realness right now, but definitely organization is important. And I think that for people who are a bit afraid of really going there to join an organization that's already established, finding people in community who are already organizing in a collective way can be that avenue to maybe get them there.
Indeed, indeed. I would like to add on just real quick. Don't mean to change the subject too much, but I would like to acknowledge um, great loss, Sly Stone from
Yes.
Sly and the Family Stone. One of my favorite all-time groups. Did so much to change the landscape of music. You know, from his first albums where you can hear the blues, the gospel, the psychedelic, the funk, all wrapped in one. And and I recently had read something called from the great drummer Max Roach, and it was called "What Jazz Means to Me." And he talked about how genres were often used in a capitalist and racist way to uh, create divisions within black music and corner certain markets for monetary gain. When he talked about uh, it's all black music, right? It's all expression of the same pain and the same root. And I think Sly and the Family Stone, and Sly Stone in particular, was a master at being able to combine all of these different sounds and take elements of all of these different black sounds and black expressions and putting them into one. So I just wanted to say, rest in power to Sly Stone, Sylvester Stewart, but it's definitely one of the um, most important musicians we have of our time. One of my comrades brought out a quote yesterday from Miles Davis that said his only peer was Sly Stone, and so that's saying a lot. Miles says that, right? So just wanted to point that out and give our acknowledgments to the ancestor.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I do want to just acknowledge everybody who's been commenting. All of your comments are affirmed, validated, and particularly Gregory, who raised that we have to see this moment as an opportunity. This really is an organizing opportunity. Definitely want to shout out a click in the view to acknowledge the distractions that are being thrown in our faces, and then the artistic perfect life to talk about intellectuals within these organizations that find a few things out and decide that they want to condescend to others. That's one of the reasons why there is such a divide between academia and more grassroots organizing. I'll say a lot of people think that the two can't abide together
Hmm.
because they've had some bad experiences within these organizations that will focus on, I won't even say they focus on political education. They want you to be a Marxist Leninist, and they're going to read all the shit that Lenin wrote. They're going to read all the shit that Marx wrote, and they want you to know it word for word. But when it comes down to real African principles, they
Hmm.
are missing. They are devoid of them. And that is the problem with a lot of these organizations wherein people find themselves.
You said a
Absolutely.
mouthful.
Yeah. So I think we're going to jump into a Black Power break real quick because we got some stories to connect to what we've been talking about that, you know, just highlights more of the chaos and brings it, you know, and brings more context and specific actual things that are happening now into the conversation. So we'll see you on the other side. You're watching Black Power Media, the Rise Up Morning Show.
Empire, and the social construct of white supremacy. Law enforcement today in the United States has its roots in this history. When we see time after time on the internet and on our cell phones, African men and women being murdered, brutally killed by law enforcement, we ask ourselves, well, how is this possible? Why does this continue? And the answer is very simple. Law enforcement in the United States today has its auspices and its origins in slave trade, in the appropriation of black bodies for the benefit of the ruling elite and the owners of property. You know, some of you may have heard about the Constitution of the United States. Purportedly, it's the greatest document ever penned by human beings. Let white folks tell it. And it's on par with the Magna Carta. Well, we know what happened in Europe after the Magna Carta, now don't we? How the bourgeoisie and the business class rose to power, and we have what we have today. But the Constitution of the United States had a clause in it that said that all men, and they use men, so all you women in here, yeah, you should shake your head talking about it. I knew they was on some misogynist shit. Yeah, they said all men, and they meant all men. They ain't mean women. They said all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But there was a clause, and this clause was political. This clause was economic. This clause reflected the white supremacist social construct of colonialism, of European hegemony and ownership of property. And that clause said that all men are created equal except African slaves, who are 3/5 of a human being. 3/5. Now, some people would say that, well, what did that mean? You know, what did that mean, that you weren't a whole person, that a slave wasn't? No. What it meant was that the owners of the plantation class, the agricultural ownership class, the owners of the cotton plantations and the sugar plantations, they had a right to vote. And each property owner who was a white male had one vote. But if he owned African slaves, and he owned 3 of them, or 5 of them, he would have an additional vote, because this was his property. This was very unique. You could own 4 cows, but that didn't give you another vote. But if you owned an African, that was your property. And if you owned enough Africans, you can have more votes. So that meant that the large plantation owners in the South could wield their power even though they were small in number. Because there was a point in the development of the plantation system in which African chattel slaves outnumbered their owners. This is important to understand. Because when we listen today to the cry, Black Lives Matter, we have to understand the roots of that cry, of that slogan. White people owned black bodies. And they had the right to do with those bodies whatever they wanted to. That ownership of an African reflected the wealth of the owner, reflected the political power of the owner. And law enforcement that arose out of this system had its first organization around the slave patrols. And, the slave patrols were such that if an African was found off of the property, off of the plantation at certain hours of the day, any white person could stop this African and demand some identification or an explanation as to why they were there. Why weren't they home on their plantation? And who did they belong to? This is the mentality that led to the kneeling in the neck of George Floyd. These crackers still think they own us. These crackers still think our bodies belong to them. And so when organizations come along that demand that black people defend themselves against this atrocious dehumanization, we are labeled thugs, criminals, and violent prone. White Americans think they have a right to kill us, to own us. And so when the plea goes up after the Trayvon Martin trial, in which the murderer of Trayvon Martin got away based on the defense, was acquitted based on the defense of stand your ground. That he had the right, that white people have the right to stand their ground against attack. Not to mention the fact that Trayvon Martin was attacked, not the white person. But anyway, he was acquitted. And a hue and cry went up. A hashtag came on the internet, Black Lives Matter. And when Ferguson erupted after the murder of Mike Brown, Black Lives Matter's hashtag became national. People marched through the streets, black people and whites marched through the streets protesting the murder of Michael Brown. However, we need to understand one thing, that hashtag movements are not liberation movements. That you cannot organize a people's movement and a people's liberation struggle on the internet. So this was then and this is now.
We're back. We're back. You are tuned in to the Rise Up Morning Show. I am Natasha X here with my Undungus, Kayana, and Rakeem. We are here this morning bringing you all of the latest, catching up and making and putting together context and making connections. And so we're back on the other side. We got a couple of stories to get into. So we're going to start off by, looking at the story that's out about the LA protest. So we'll start off with that one. Oh yeah, I was like, wait, do I have it up? But I definitely do have it up. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And then we'll discuss a little bit and we'll connect it to a lot of what Daruba was saying. I think that like a lot of what Daruba was saying in that clip that we were watching really connects to what we were talking about before, but also what's happening in LA and the use of the military forces and what that means and what that represents. And so just quickly, so the topic is, the LA protest updates, California suing Trump over National Guard deployment. Brother Rakeem, I think you wanted to talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, one thing that just kind of it's that caught my eye, I guess, was just the idea of what are you actually suing over that you're not doing, like you're not like a part of yourself, right? Like, but if you can, the actual one that I wanted to kind of go through was the Marines one here.
Mhm.
where it says the Pentagon was scrambling Monday to establish rules to guide U.S. Marines who could be faced with the rare and difficult prospect of using force against citizens of American soil now that the Trump administration is deploying active duty troops to the immigration raid protest in Los Angeles. In U.S. Northern Command said sending 700 Marines into the Los Angeles area to protect federal property and personnel, including federal immigration agents. And the 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines are coming from 29 Palms, California, and will augment about 4,000 National Guard members already in LA, authorized to be deployed there to respond to the protests. The forces have been trained in okay, crowd control and standing rules for the use of force, Northern Command said. One thing about that just I was speaking to one of my comrades, and he was telling me about someone that that was someone that was in the military. I'm not sure which branch, but he had just got back from deployment, right? And it was when uh, the Rodney King uprisings were happening, and he talked about how he had just got back from deployment overseas, right? He was a young brother, and as we know, like especially in those times, most young black people that joined the military did so for economic reasons, not necessarily being patriots of this country. And so he had just got back from deployment, and then as soon as he got back, the uprisings in LA pops off, and he's sent out there to de-escalate what's happening in those uprisings. And from what my friend said, that like what that did to him mentally, like he still speaks about to this day, where the level of PTSD that he got from being sent out there to do that, the internal struggle that he was going through, accepting those orders. This story is, just made me think of that. And there'll be a lot more cases of that. And also, I just think we need to really be cognizant of how quickly the U.S. government and the normalization of sending military troops on its own citizens is becoming, right. It's even with certain demographics and certain segments of the population, it's even cheered on, right. The for some, the only real citizens in this situation are the U.S. military that will be coming to de-escalate the situation, not the brothers and sisters who are out there looking for a better world, looking for a right to work without exploitation, looking for the right to not be harassed and ask for papers like this is apartheid South Africa, right? These aren't the people that are humanized. The people that will be humanized are the people in full riot gear and full military gear, uh, uh, de-escalating, right? And when we talk about this de-escalation, we're talking about violence. You know what I'm saying? That's that's what they're trained to do. And so it's just I want everybody to just always be aware of how this is being normalized, how sending military troops to different issues around the country domestically is becoming normalized. We're going to see more of this. So just stay prepared and stay diligent.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, and I'll pulling the curtain back. I know that I shot this over to Raheem, but I know I had like some things to say about this particular article in terms of us also realizing and maybe setting a little bit of the stage for the people, whoever's watching from wherever you're watching, whether people know as much about it or not, especially since it just happened right this weekend,
Hmm.
where the protest popped off on June 6th in response to the ICE raids that were happening. And they've been arresting a lot of people. They've been instances of violence, things that are, peaceful. And so just seeing this, I remember even when I woke up, I think I was on Saturday, and I saw that, like, oh, okay, there were um things happening. I didn't really realize that, this happened the day before on the 6th, and that these protests were happening. But when I found out about it, it really reminded me of, like, going back to think about how Daruba was mentioning George Floyd, and when we had all of those protests that were erupting, we even it made me even think about, like, Rodney King back in the day, when we had all of those protests that erupted as well. And so this, seeing again this replay of people having to come out and protest, because we know that the police, this law enforcement, and in this case, ICE as the police,
Right.
and this is a response to an overreach of, just like in many of the other cases that I just mentioned really quickly, this overreach of police, this acting out in this in this kind of draconian authoritarian maneuvers that they've been doing, whether or not, when you're killing someone as a police officer because they have something in their hand, or they're running away from you, is the same kind of authoritarian draconian move as ICE coming out and going and asking people to show their IDs, or just profiling people and saying, like, okay, well, we're going to deport you. And I think also too, connecting when we were talking about before, how this should matter to our community, how they are also gearing up to do the same thing with those who are not from Latin America, that are us, that are immigrants. So it's not just going to be happening, and they're not just doing these moves just toward the immigrant communities that are from Latin America, and that there's a lot of us who are also from Latin America, that are of African descent as well. And so just thinking about, like, the overreach of police, and the way that police are being used and have been given this kind of free pass to escalate everything. And I think this is just a continuation of that when we talk about militarism, when we're talking about abuse of police force. All of those things are going on, especially when we're thinking about even the way that things are being done to control, quote unquote, these protests that are happening. And so we also know that the Pentagon, according to this article, is trying to establish some guidelines for, like, how they work with the crowds, how they de-escalate things. But we know that just them being deployed in general, the Marines has been raising a lot of, like, legal and ethical concerns, especially considering that it went against the California governor did not ask for the military to be released, for the National Guard to come. And so I think that's the other part of it too that is being talked about. There's already all of these legal implications for just the way that ICE has been maneuvering in general that have already been brought up, but I think it also adds another layer to it.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, I was just saying, you mentioned something about Mexican, different immigrant communities that are in some of these communities being Black. I just wanted people to understand that there's also different Afro-Mexican communities who are moving to Southern LA who could be, affected by a lot of these things that are going on as well. So just because you see Hispanic or Latino in the news and whatever you're reading, doesn't mean that some of those quote unquote Hispanics or Latinos aren't of African descent either.
Absolutely. And I also just want to point out that when it comes to Governor Newsom suing the Trump administration for sending the National Guard without consent of the government of California, I don't expect this to go very far, very honestly. because there have been some bills that have been passed that a lot of people are not very knowledgeable about because they were passed back in the 90s when the first Bush was president. And many of these acts allow for some of the stuff that Trump is doing.
Hmm.
Many of these bills allow the president to deploy the National Guard without the consent of the state.
Oh, you went on mute.
Yeah, you went on mute.
You must have pressed the button by accident.
Oh, I'm sorry. There are definition changes and amendments in some of these bills that would classify the uprisings in LA as acts of terror. Remember, once the Patriot Act was passed,
Hmm.
y'all, so many things have changed.
Hmm.
And when it comes down to it, I don't believe that this lawsuit is really going to have teeth, to tell you the truth. And if it does, it will be kicked down the road for quite some time
Yeah.
before there is any resolution. And I don't believe there's going to be any type of reparation that will have to be considered on behalf of the administration. If the court finds in favor of the state of California, there will just be a decision in favor of the state of California to say, yep, Trump, you was bad. You did that wrong. You shouldn't have done it. And that's going to be that. So, again, with the distraction and the game that they're playing and the dances that they do, right? Because it's all a dance that they do, these people who are in these positions of authority, particularly when it comes to governors, the president, state and federal representatives. They do this dance, and sometimes they make us believe
Yeah.
that one of them is wanting to be on the right side of history and standing with and for the people, but the reality of it is that none of them are for us.
As if Los Angeles does not have one of the most horrible histories of policing our communities in this country, right? And I don't care whether it's a liberal or a conservative in office, that doesn't seem to change much. And I'm with you, Kiana. We can't be caught up in a lot of this dance that they do in front of the public when at the end of the day, not much has changed or is going to change if they have anything to do with it. Both Democrats and Republicans are law and order type of politicians, and yeah. So I just can't. We can't get caught up in the dog and pony show.
Yeah, definitely can't. I refuse to.
Hmm.
What is important to be focused on is what was already highlighted and amplified here, that these same tactics that are being used in LA are the ones that are learned from places like Israel, the way they terrorize Palestinians, the same tactics that are being used for a quote unquote um, riot, as it's being framed by so many news outlets. The same thing happens when people are just standing around and raising their voices to say no justice, no peace. So I'm
Hmm.
trying to figure out what's the difference. How do you differentiate?
Right.
We also have to point out the fact that a lot of people on social media are they're not even being the devil's advocate. They are just the devil
Mm.
because they are telling lies and the truth is not in them, right? There are people on social media who are posting clips of riots back in the day.
Hmm.
There are people who are posting clips
Hmm.
of people looting when Rodney King was beat down and got no justice.
Right.
And it's so crazy because, again, miss me with all of this talk about the quote unquote looting. I don't care
Yeah.
about any major corporation in California or anywhere else because they have insurance and they'll get that shit back 15 times over.
And
But what I
to
do care about is the conditions in which people live, where
yeah.
looting is even a thing that matters. And to that
I,
nonsense right there, we already know that you're a bot and a plant,
because
because the fact that you use the term illegal
invader.
invader, you're the illegal invader, bruh. You're the one that's about to get kicked out of this space
you know, I,
because you don't belong here and ain't welcome.
I've seen so many people say this over the past few days of calling those Mexican brothers and sisters invaders and illegals, and it's like one just one iota of understanding of the history of this country, this land belongs to them more than it would ever belong to these settlers, right? And just to hear people uphold and promote the colonial borders and settler colonialism itself is such a wild concept to me, but I am definitely seeing it.
I think
Absolutely.
I think that it definitely shows a lack of understanding of just history, and how what we are engaged in now, the way that the moves are being made when we're thinking about immigration is based on this being a settler colonial project and an unfinished settler colonial project, because
Absolutely.
the settler colonial project is not finished. And so that's why you would need to make sure that when you do make these moves in terms of thinking about immigration and thinking about how you're going to position people, how you're going to be framing people that are immigrants here, that it's part of getting you to support the settler colonial project. When you say those kind of things, it helps you support that, because it doesn't acknowledge, right? It doesn't acknowledge that this is a settler colonial nation, but it also supports the false narrative of the United States as this kind of immigrant nation where everyone came here as immigrants legally, and they then, after coming here legally, decided to work very hard, quote unquote, pull themselves up by their bootstraps and create this great nation. And so therefore, they have to protect it, and they have to protect it against all of those who would want to destroy this beautiful thing that was created in such a legal process, and such a nice way of doing it. If we came here nicely, we came here legally as immigrants, those who started this settler colonial nation came here nicely as immigrants. And so these other people, should also come here nicely as immigrants, which we know that's not the story, right? You
at all
as invaders who dispossessed, genocided the people, took the land. Not only did you take the land through genocide and war, but you also destroyed the land through genocide.
Same thing that's happening in Palestine.
You don't
Literally.
care about, you never cared about people, and you never cared about the land either. And that's why you continue to do the things that you do. And now you want to make sure that, okay, you're controlling, because even if people look into the history of how California came to be, how Texas came to be, the death and destruction, and the murder of so many people who are actually indigenous to this land, whose territory that it actually was, how much bigger Mexico was, and how even before you get to the war between America and Mexico, you have years and years of those those settlers, those European settlers moving into those territories that were of another country, that were in Mexico, that were part of Mexico already. They illegally moved into those places to push people the same way that when we think about, ethnic cleansing here in the United States, in the way in which white people move into our places where we're already living to start setting up shop, and then to invite more white people to come live there, so then eventually you could no longer live in that area. They did this, these were already larger scale practices that happened for them to even have states like California and Mexico. They moved their people into a whole country and territory, and basically said, we're going to be here, and if you don't like it, fight us. We got the military behind us. And when DeRuber was talking about how, basically when we think about how this country operates, and he was talking about how George Zimmerman, how white people have the license to kill and to surveil and to terrorize other groups of people. That's what happened when we're thinking about the way in which Mexico and the people, who are coming from through Mexico and people who live on those borders, how their land was taken because they sent white people over there to surveil and to do whatever they want with the Mexican people and say, look, if anything happens to you, the US military is behind you. So if you want some land that, of these people and you happen to take it and now they want to fight you for it, the US will back you. And that's, and so if people just even look into the history of that, all of those things have to be taken into account. All of these things have to be acknowledged when talking about who's quote unquote illegal. What does it mean to be illegal? What does it mean to be in territory? And what really is going on here when we're talking about this real fight against, immigration and with immigration and this whole issue of immigration and even bringing in the corporations and how they play a role in, the immigration and people being here undocumented and how that's an abuse and how they bring them here and then send them back. And there's a whole cycle of things going on. All of that needs to be put onto the table.
I think one thing
Yes.
that we also have to put on the table is why there's this narrative floating around. Obviously, it's rooted in white nationalism. Where if their country was so good, why are they coming over here? And it totally ignores what America and the West has done to different nations within the global South, the economic exploitation, the war that has been waged on them. And so, if you ravage and devastate um, someone's nation, extract their resources, and center the wealth of their nation in your nation, of
Mhm.
course you're going to have people come from that nation that was just ravaged to where the bag is. They're not
Absolutely.
here because they just love America like that. Like, I don't, it's people are trying to feed their families, and they're trying to navigate the destruction that has been caused for centuries by the West. And so
Absolutely.
that's just one thing that, as far as like the brother asked, are we talking about open borders for millions? Hey, look, I don't have that answer, but what I do understand is they have to reconcile this because they are the cause of this. America and the West are the cause of different migrant communities fleeing what's happening in their nation, right? And so however that's reconciled is how it's reconciled, but it has to be done.
And let's just be clear. US borders have been open to millions all the time. It just ain't
Right,
millions of black people.
right.
It ain't
Right.
millions of Mexican indigenous people who should not have to apply for any quote unquote citizenship
Hmm.
here.
Hmm.
They're not open to millions who look like us.
Hmm.
Oh,
Black,
but they've
brown, and
been
Muslim.
open to Europeans for a long time.
Hmm. Yeah, there's black, brown, and Muslim immigrants. No, if you're a European immigrant, you're a refugee who needs asylum, and we'll do everything
Mhm.
that we can to make your stay. Like, I mean, literally, they brought over 60 Boers. Like, what are we talking about here? You know what I'm saying? And if more wanted to come, he would have brought more. And so, like you said, Kiana, like that border policy is only for non-white people. I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'll just add, and then we can move into our other story. But I think that in relation to one of the questions from one of the uprisers in the chat, also who bears the brunt of so many unplanned new people to communities. I think that's one of the things that I think we were talking about it before, and we know we're having these conversations online. And I don't really like online conversations. I know we're online, but you know what I mean, like
Hmm.
Mhm.
people having you're having these more complex, nuanced conversations through chat. People in the chat, writing however many characters you're writing. But I think that is one of the things that when we're talking about tensions and when we're talking about people figuring out, okay, what does this have to do with us? And remembering, I think there's two things when it comes to, this question about, who bears the brunt and how does this relate to, us as a community. I think that there's I think that there's two things that it makes me think about in terms of, one, in our communities, what is when we're thinking about Black people, and what is America's agenda for Black people, and what is versus, what Black people's agenda is living here in America. And we know that, like, one of the agendas for America is to move Black people aside, to diminish the power and the resistance that we have been leading, because we do know that through our protests and resistance of this country, other groups of people, like, Asian people, or Latina people, have been able to mobilize behind that push for, a better treatment. Because once they change the laws for us, or once they position something for us, other groups that are marginalized as well are able to then gain from that. And so I do think that there has been, and there continues to be, because when we're thinking about the system of white supremacy and racism and the way that they've set it up, that we are, as Black people, the other opposite end of, white supremacy, and then everyone else in between gets different gradients of, that racism, but we really catch the hell. And so I think, in terms of thinking about how that is happening, and how America uses, like we were talking about, bringing in migrants, right? They don't want to have to pay you. They don't want to have to give you the jobs that you actually need to be able to support. What they want to do is they want to use the cheap labor. Again, going to capitalism, they want to use that cheap labor, and they also want to be able to, at the same time, use that cheap labor to help someone else replace the Black community, in the way that we're thinking about what does it mean to create communities, and what does it mean to be in a place and substantiate yourself. Because we do see that in America's plan, and I think this is part of what happened with this election, and how some Latin people were confused that they were getting ready to move into the white population, that there has to move right of America, saying, okay, how can we move using the same tactics of moving other groups of people into position, and moving them in, not in a way that actually means that they care about these people and they actually want to help these people establish themselves. No, how can we use them as another chess piece to make moves in order for us to get another group of people that we can diminish, that don't have that same kind of history that African people have. I think that the history that we have as a people here within the United States is such an antithetical to what their story is. And so if they can position another group of people there that don't have that history, that can't shine that light, that can't always put that in your face, then they would be better off. But that new group, you're still going to be like, we're people are seeing now with immigrants from Latin America in particular, that they're shining their light on right now. They're still going to set you up to be oppressed. That's why they want to make sure you stay in your place, and that they control you and don't let you think that, like, oh, okay, well, you can have power as Latin people. No, we want to remind you that, look, we're just here trying to position you to be the next group of people who are going to be oppressed, and you got to know your place. So we're going to make sure ICE is out here telling you, okay, yeah, you can be this, but don't get too comfortable.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And shout out to Crew of Bridge watching for the first time from Lake Charles. Shout out to Lake Charles and all people in Louisiana. I love it, Anthony, your Dr. Clark quote, that as Black people, we out Pope the Pope and out Muhammad. We hear what you're saying. We definitely hear what you're saying. And always solidarity and love to you, brother, because you are one of our biggest supporters, and we appreciate that so much. Moving into our next story, as we talked about how the U.S. backs settlers and promotes the devastation and destruction of other lands. This is what we see, of course, 24/7 in news coverage on social media. We'll say we always see the things that are happening over in Gaza. And again, settler colonial state that Israel is, um, Israeli settlers get to go into Palestine and take what they want. And they are backed by not only the Israeli occupation forces, but the US government. There are people leaving this country, going to Palestine, stealing land, looting, robbing, doing what Americans do. Right. So anybody who talks about looters, that's the American way. So I don't even know what the conversation is about when it comes to looting. But here we go again, Israel at its worst and being allowed to do exactly what it wants to do. Another freedom flotilla has been intercepted in international waters. And I want people to understand the gravity of the fact that they were intercepted in international waters. So that means that technically, if we are talking about so-called laws, this freedom flotilla that was carrying humanitarian aid, there were nothing but civilians on this vessel. You have the young activist, the young climate justice activist, Greta Thunberg from Sweden. You have activists from Germany. You had a doctor from France who's here, a Brazilian reporter who was on the Freedom Flotilla. But they're in international waters, not carrying weapons, not carrying anything to lay siege to Gaza, but desperately trying to get humanitarian aid into Gaza that has been blocked by Israel for so long. And understand that it is a war crime to use starvation and withholding of medical treatment as a tool of war, which is what Israel has been doing for the longest. So at around 3:30 a.m. local time on June 9th, the Freedom Flotilla Coalition announced that it had lost contact with the Madeleine, a Gaza-bound humanitarian aid vessel, and shared an image of the 12 activists on board with life jackets on and their hands raised. Just moments earlier, the Freedom Flotilla Coalition had warned that the Madeleine was, quote, under assault in international waters. The boat, carrying essential food and medical supplies for Palestinians starved under the Israeli blockade, was suddenly but not unexpectedly hit by electronic interference. Peep the technology. The ship's live tracking and navigation systems were disabled, and its location was spoofed, appearing falsely near Jordan while en route to the Gaza Strip. Quote, quadcopters are surrounding the ship, spraying it with a white irritant substance. Communications are jammed and disturbing sounds are being played over the radio, end quote. The FFC noted in a statement released in the early hours of Monday. In a final video update shared at 2:40 a.m. Via FFC's Telegram channel, minutes before the Madeleine was rammed and boarded by the Israeli regime, the German activist Yasmin Akar, who is 37, appeared visibly shaken. In a selfie video, she stood on the contaminated deck, surrounded by stunned fellow activists after unknown chemicals had been dropped from Israeli drones on the deck. Quote, they are dropping chemicals on us, said Akar, turning her camera toward the white substance coating the deck. Quote, look at this, she said before yelling, everyone take cover, please. They are not peaceful. This is not an interception. This is another war crime about to happen. We are civilians carrying nothing but humanitarian aid. Please keep your eyes on us. The article goes on to talk about some of the quotes from other activists who were on board. What ended up happening was that the Freedom Flotilla Coalition posted a video that was pre-recorded. And in the beginning of the video, you can hear one of the Brazilian journalists, I think it's Tiago Avila, saying, if you're watching this, then we have been captured by the Israeli occupation forces. So Israel gets to go into international waters and grab citizens from all over the world, right? The video because it was pre-recorded, shows each activist stating their name, where they're from, and imploring anyone watching to contact their government to pressure Israel to release them.
Mm.
Why in the hell? Like, why is this something that has to be a thing? Why is everybody so afraid of these punks? I guess it's because they have US and UK backing. They have the quote unquote two world superpowers behind them. But at the end of the day, when are we really going to resist? And when it comes down to the other countries, like what Israel has done is not only definitely a war crime, but a United Nations resolution can be passed to quote unquote stop it, because we see what UN resolutions do. But just symbolically, right? Why would the US ambassador to the United Nations continue to veto any resolution that passes through the United Nations Human Rights Committee or any other committee that talks about sanctions against Israel? The United States ambassador to the UN continues to veto everything. And it's really crazy. You even have the UK Foundation, the Hind Rajab Foundation, that is filing war crimes charges against Israel in the International Criminal Court because they intercepted a UK vessel that was carrying humanitarian aid.
Mm.
So when does it stop? Where does it stop? What's happening right now is that people are beginning to see in real time, and it is being televised, the inextricable links of what's happening around the world. Because the same things that are happening in Israel, how people in Palestine have to live in a police state. They've been living in a police state for so many years under Israeli rule. The US government and local governments in the United States have contracted with the Israeli occupation forces to provide deadly exchange programs that take our officers from the United States to train with the Israelis, and they come back here and they import the violence and terror that they learn in Israel. The things that have been done when you talk about law enforcement exchanges and cop cities being built, the whole concept comes from Israel. Israel has a little Gaza where they practice murdering and terrorizing Palestinians. Our officers go there to learn the same stuff. Now you got police chiefs coming back to the United States being impressed with the level of surveillance in Palestine by Israel. You get these liberals out here gentrifying and being afraid of the black people whose neighborhoods they come to take over, wanting more surveillance, and people are used to it because they're thinking that it'll keep them safe. But the only thing that it does is condition us and get us into position to be ruled completely within a militarized police state. And that's why militarism of police, local police, is so dangerous. That is why people were posting online yesterday, right here in Atlanta, the train tracks that go that cut through black neighborhoods. They got tanks on them again. We're seeing 2020 level shit happening again. All the things that were going on when people rose up like never before after the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Here we are again, because yes, it's go time. Yes, things are serious. No, this is not a drill. And yes, the revolution is being televised this time because people are not willing to stay quiet. What we can have a conversation about further is how it is that we need to engage. We do need to engage in guerrilla warfare. We don't need to always show up in mass drills in one place at one time. But we got to do something. Like staying home is not an option. And when I say staying home is not an option, I mean staying out of the resistance is not an option. Like you can definitely be at home and organize and resist. Definitely can. But we have to resist. We have to do something. We have to prepare our neighborhoods. We have to get community together and make sure that we are prepared going down the line, because there is more to come.
You know, for me, it just shows how Israel knows at this point it can get away with anything. There's so
Hmm.
kidnapping. All right, so we know obviously the genocide that's happening um, with the Palestinians, uh, the, and that's our focus. Um, but it does not mean that the wrath of Israel is limited to just Palestine.
That's right.
And so, again, it just highlights the idea that right now I mean, they're flexing their power, and they're showing the
Hmm.
world that, hey, whatever you consider a war crime, whatever you think about what we're doing over here in Palestine, whatever you think about uh, things such as this, the kidnapping of people coming to give aid to Palestinians, they don't care, and it also goes to their inhumaneness. Like they don't see anyone else as people, as humans. They run with their idea of being God's chosen, right? And so I believe many of them really feel like that gives them some type of autonomy to uh, control the lives and direction of all other people, right? They really have internalized this idea that they are Semitic people from the Levant who were chosen by God to lead the
Hmm.
world. And so they move like that, right?
Yeah.
Even though we know that some of the early Zionists were in actuality atheists, it doesn't mean that they still didn't embody those principles of we are the chosen, therefore we get to determine and dictate all facets of life in the Levant,
Mm.
because we can clearly see that's how they feel. And
Yeah.
like you mentioned, with the support of the UK, with the support of the United States, they're moving with impunity right now. And as long as they know that they're going to move with impunity, we'll see more of this.
Absolutely. Anthony said he don't know if we're ready for all this here pain resistance and stuff. And you know what, Anthony? I'm not gonna even um yeah, I feel you on that. I feel you on that. And it's a daunting thing to think about sometimes, but we gotta get ready as we can be. We can't keep letting these people play in our faces and not do anything. And the thing about it is that we don't have to do things within their system and within their framework of operations. We have autonomy to do what it is that we can do in community
Mhm,
without having to move the way they move. We don't have to have their permission to do anything.
mhm. And the
And
first part of the
it's up to
resistance, first,
us.
first part of resisting is decolonizing your thinking, being in community with the people that you should be in community with, is beginning to take that journey of embracing your Africanity and learning your history and your politics and the movements
Mhm.
that came before us. A lot of the resistance is mental, because what has been done to our minds is clearly as socialization that lead us towards assimilation instead of any type of resistance. And so
Absolutely.
I just wanted to throw that out there. Like, whenever we say resistance, nobody's telling anyone to be a crash test dummy, grab a Molotov, go outside, and just start catching wreck. That's not what anybody's saying, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it starts with your mind. It starts with
Mhm.
uh, as Tasha pointed out. Um, Finding the organization that fits what you're trying to do,
Mhm.
and also too, I think it's important to say this. It's important to say this. There is so much going on, right? There's so much going on where you might feel overwhelmed. Like, how do I take part in resisting it all? You just got to find one issue that's important, focus on that, and work on that. You know what I'm saying? Like, simplify it a little bit, because it's all connected. You muted.
Absolutely.
And I want to give an example to what Brother Rakeem is talking about. But before I do that, I did want to say that I think that in terms of us, in terms of the way that thinking about this, the way that they, abducted and kidnapped these people in international waters, I think for me, it really brings up the question of, okay, how is what Israel is doing supporting white hegemony across the world? Because it has to be supporting it in order for it to be able to happen at this level. Because we know that, like, for example, what, Ibrahim Traore and the other Sahel states are doing, they've been trying to kidnap him, get him out of, position. And we have seen even the head of the military, talking about how great of a threat terroristically now, quote unquote, Burkina Faso is. So we know that the United States and other countries that support the United States and support white hegemony have no problem coming out and taking a stand against what they feel is a quote unquote threat.
Mm-hmm.
We know that when it's not a threat and in which it's something that actually supports them, they're going to be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And so this happening in international waters, I think, when you brought that point up, Kiana, is really important, because it doesn't just call into thinking about how what Israel's doing is beneficial to obviously the US and places like England and France. We know these colonial powers that benefit from settler colonialism, that have engaged in it themselves, and that share secrets amongst each other. But it also brings into question other nations that are also part of this world. When we're talking about international waters, it's not just European countries that are part of this international community. So it makes me think back to when Iran had sent those those missiles over into Israel when this was happening. And I'm thinking about what are the responses to this of those countries that support Palestine? Because yes, we as individuals can fight and raise our voice in solidarity to what is happening in terms of the genocide in Palestine, but also there's countries, and a lot of these countries have a lot more power than, let's say, the average individual citizen in different countries.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are they saying? What's their response to this happening in international waters? And if their response is missing, what does that mean? Why is their the response missing? When we're talking about resistance and we're looking at, again, just bringing back the point that at one point, Iran did send missiles over into Israel because of what they've been doing, and seeing this happen now and thinking about what then is the response of the rest of the international community to this particular thing, knowing that it happened in international waters. And I think that that's one of the things that I'm thinking about is, what does this mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and what does it mean for how the whole world is reacting to or not reacting to, and I say the whole world is like, many other countries not interacting or not acting to this. And how does that what does that show us about global white hegemony? Who's benefiting from it? Who's maneuvering with it in particular ways that we don't realize? Because we're in a different time than when we're thinking about countries that were colonized but didn't have that kind of military support. We didn't also have that kind of, like, we had an interconnected world in a sense, but we're super interconnected now. And so if in a time like this, you don't have a bunch of these countries that do support Palestine really coming out and really, taking a position or saying something in that, and maybe I'm missing it. If I am missing it, somebody find it, throw it in the chat, whether now or later. because I think that's an important thing for us to think about when we're talking about what is happening in this particular instance that happened in international waters.
Indeed, indeed.
And so, yeah. So I think with that, we are closing out for this morning. We thank you all uprisers for being here with us.
Absolutely.
We will see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. And yeah, just keep rising up and, you know, gather together and rise up. And so we'll catch up later on tomorrow.
Indeed. It's good to see you, Natasha. Great to be back. Great to see the family in the chat, man. See y'all tomorrow. Y'all have an amazing rest of your day.
All right. Uhuru. Rise up. And we are rising up right now. Out of here.
Sometimes the riot is a quiet one. Well, the battle is to love yourself and function in society where voices of reason are muted by anxiety, like gaining notoriety is selling your soul. So we tend to go no deeper than the shallow water level, trying to keep us overhead in the face of all the slurs and the stares, mentally frozen, paralyzed by fear of failure and success. So we lock, stock, barrel, running while it's crumbling. All these towers and they're babbling, but the baby's in the bath and the stash under the bed on my head, spinning from the circles and the puppets and the strings that they pull. Then we move. Reactionary warfare never produces when it's on the field. Feeble and foolish. What tools and what weapons are we using? We need some new ones. Real revolution. It's real solutions. Well, we've taken on the ways of the ones who conquer with their guns and religion and division. Got my inner me looking like my enemy. Real revolution. Well, my inner me, really a mirror for the galaxy. New time, brand new paradigms, new contracts to sign. They thought that this would all be televised, though it's happening right before our very eyes. It's on the inside, with their guns cocked. When that rock drops, standing on the rooftop, praying that the mountaintop can live inside the valley. People tell me the reward is somewhere off in heaven, like heaven's only in the sky. Like chariots are swinging, like God is something separate from yourself, from your wealth, from your lover, from your neighbor. Oh, your savior is coming in your own name, coming with the face the same. Real revolution. It's real solutions. Well, we've taken on the ways of the ones who conquer with their guns and religion and division. Got my inner me looking like my enemy. Real revolution. Where my enemy is really a mirror for the galaxy.